Thank you. Thank you. I feel loved. Thank you for sharing that with me. To be in your space is a blessing, and I'm grateful for every time that I get to walk back in this church. Thank you. It's often interesting when we get to choose talk titles, and I'm so grateful that Kathy allows me the opportunity to choose it. We try to sometimes, and I learned this actually from her, to try to stay in tune with what's going on around us in the world. She's really great about that, and I love that energy from her. It's all about what's going on right now in present moment. And so when she asked me what I wanted to talk about, I said, how about tragedy? She said, well, I don't know about that. Yeah. I mean, who wants to talk about that? Tragedy sucks, right? Truthfully. So before we start, I'm going to ask you to affirm this with me. I'm going to ask you to affirm, to open our mind to align with Spirit. And this affirmation is, I open my mind to align with Spirit. Can you do that with me? I open my mind to align with Spirit. You see, because what we know about unity is thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. We've learned that. Reverend Dr. Paul Hasselback would tell you they tend to produce after their kind, and that's a whole nother talk. But we know the power of our thoughts, right? We do. You know, it seems like everywhere in the world there's continually a tragedy going on. There's just always something going on. And of course, now we have the tragedy of the hurricane that happened in Florida, and the people who are still struggling and to get back into their homes and get back into things. And, you know, maybe you in your life over the past year or two, maybe over the past few months, have experienced a tragedy. I know I have. I've had several tragedies. Some of them I've got to share with you over the past year and a half, and 2 years, actually. Multiple tragedies. So how do we work through these tragedies? I want to talk to you today not only about how we can survive through tragedy, but how we can thrive through tragedy. How do we find meaning in tragedy? You say, well, that's not possible. But we say that God is all good in all things. So there's always that question. How is God in a hurricane? How is God in the sudden death of a family member? How is God in the idea that I've taken on an illness that I did not expect, that may be tragic and may be terminal? We have all of these things. And I want to offer you today some tools that will give you hope, some strength, and remind you that your light does not have to be extinguished when tragedy comes in your life. You see, the question is not, will tragedy happen to you, or will it happen to me? It will. I promise you faithfully, it's going to happen to you, even if it's your own death. It's going to happen, right? There's going to be tragedy in your life. The question is, what do you do next? What have you empowered yourself with to do? For me, life is really not about the successes, what we achieve, but to me, it's about how do I show up in tragedy? How do I be that presence, that Christ nature, that loving presence for myself, and to those around me when tragedy appears? Because it is going to appear. When I think about the families and survivors of the recent hurricane, they had basically two choices to deal with this tragedy that's coming in their life. They can become victim to that tragedy and bam, all of a sudden everything's awful and, I can't get through this or they can find meaning in it. They can find the good in that. And I believe it was in this church that I showed a video once when my parents had went through a tornado, and how the people in that video, they talked about how we're coming together and how our neighbors are coming together. You see, there's hope in tragedy. God is in tragedy. There's a story I'd like to share with you about my dental hygienist. It's actually not a good story. I'm sorry. I'd like to share a good one with you. But it's one of those stories where this was the lady who took care of my teeth. I still go to the same dentist. I've been going there since I was very small. And I really loved her. She did a great job. She was always so happy and cheerful. And I can still see her with, she was way too old to wear braces, but she wore braces. And it was so cute because I can just see her right now and how much she cared and loved on me as a child. She had two beautiful children, a husband, and her daughter at the age of 18 was in an accident with a dump truck and she was killed. And I remember this story so greatly because I remember how many it impacted around her. I remember going into that office and that beautiful smile and that beautiful nature and love and everything that exuded from her now became sadness, depression, weight, and ultimately victimness from this tragedy. It started out with, eventually the dentist had to release her because they just couldn't take it. It was nonstop. It had enveloped her life. It went to her children then. She had other children. Couldn't focus on them. So now her relationship with her children suffered, and ultimately with her husband. Last I knew of her, and this was a few years back, she still had not gotten over this. This has been about 25 years ago. Now, I've lost a couple dogs. Don't have any children, but I know what it feels like to lose a dog. Okay, after being with them 16, 17, 18 years and waking up with them and licks and loves and all of that, and to lose that animal is hard. I just can't imagine a child. But what I do know is that there is hope there. There is strength there. There is good somehow in that loss. And we can decide in the middle of our tragedy, how are we going to handle it? How are we going to show up when that happens? Because it's going to happen, folks. It's going to happen. I'd like to show you the cycle here. It's called the Kubler-Ross grief cycle. And I'm going to read a little bit of it to you just because I know it's probably not the largest here. There's actually a cycle that we go through, and I don't want to get into a bunch of psychology here, but I want you to see this because the next time you're in a tragedy, I want you to notice these levels that we go in and through as we're going through a tragedy. And they, just so you know, they're not always the same. Some people go through different things at different times. But I want you to see, the first thing we do is go into denial. Right? You've seen it, you've had it before where we go into shock, we go into fear, we go into confusion, avoidance. We really go through this thing. We just didn't want to know what happened, right? So shock is like the first thing for me. It's like I don't even acknowledge it. And then we go to the next layer, which is anger. We're still going down the hill. We're frustrated. We're irritated. We start having anxiety. Things are really bad. We're still in that moment. And we need to deal with these guys, so we don't want to pass these up. This is human nature, right? Then we go into possibly the deepest part, which is depression, where we feel overwhelmed, helpless, we have hostility and flight. In other words, we want to run away from it, right? Because it's so bad that we think we can't handle this. Now, unfortunately, this is where my Danielle Hutchiness got stuck. She couldn't pull herself up just a little bit, just 1 second. Because if you could get yourself just a little bit and start climbing out of that hole and start bargaining with yourself, you see, that's when the point we're going to start struggling for meaning, reaching out to others, telling our story to people. When you hold it in, it's not good. You got to release. Find someone safe around you when you go through a tragedy. And open that door, right? So that way people can experience it with you, support you, and love you. And then there's that good stage where we start accepting it, exploring options, putting new plans in place. We start moving on. You see, this is the point when we start realizing God is. God is, God is. I am. God is, I am. God is in everything. So what is it that I can do to pull God is, I am out of that? I'm not telling you it's easy. It's not. You might imagine a tragedy that you went through in your life, that you got stuck in one of these areas and couldn't pull yourself out. You're here now, so you pull yourself out some way, right? You're at that stage now, you're ready to climb up. You're still climbing. You're at church every week climbing to reach, because life can deal us all of these things. You see, I believe when life gives us tragedy, we sometimes feel like we're drowning, right? It's so overwhelming around us. And I love this metaphor idea of, what if I just surrender to it? What if I just say, okay, it's engulfed me, and I just keep sinking down in the water till I get to the bottom and I feel something solid, and then I push myself back up out of there and say, no, I'm not ready yet. I don't want to drown. What if I push myself back up and I start breathing again out into the air? Sometimes we got to surrender and release. One of my favorite things that Unity has is to surrender and release. Let go of what doesn't serve us. And I don't think any of those ideas on the downside serve us in our lives. So what can be the game changer? You say you got all this stuff, you got all this information. What is it that really can help me to work through these things? Well, I'm going to share some stuff that's going to help you work through not just a tragedy, but every day of your life. Because I'm going to tell you, you wake up, things happen. I was on my way here. My mind says it's an hour and a half. I'm going to be there an hour early. Everything is good. That was New Thought Unity. Here's an extra half an hour. So I texted and I said, Kim, I'm going to be there at 25 minutes till, and we're going to make it happen. It's going to be beautiful. Things happen. Every day we're dealing with this. And if you're not, I don't know what world you're living in, but it's not this one. Because it's challenging out there right now. You see, the game changer is called resilience. Creating resilience. Now, I knew what resilience was, kind of, but then once I started researching it, doing my Surviving to Thriving class that I do every month, I started realizing resilience is something that I can work on right now. It's something you can walk out of here with, and you can create a plan to start being more resilient in your life. There's a psychologist named Martin Seligman, and he found that there are 3 P's that are critical to bounce back from any hardship. He says the seeds of resilience are planted in the way we process negative events in our lives. So we have to plant seeds. You see, we have to make our garden filled with seeds, not weeds, so that we can grow through these things, not go through them. You see, if we go through them, what's going to happen next? You're going to go through it again and again and again and again and again. When you grow through them, the next time that resilience, those seeds that you planted, the fertilizer, the water, everything you put on, your flower is going to bloom a little better. Yeah, there's going to be storms. It's going to try to blow your petals off your bloom. But you're going to be able to stand in it. There is a beautiful video that I found by Sheryl Sandberg. Was until last November the COO of Facebook. And great story. She did the 2016 graduation ceremony at a school out in California, Berkeley College is actually the name of it. And she talks about these 3 P's that Martin Seligman discovered and how they saved her. And they saved her because she was on a trip in Mexico with her husband. They were doing a long needed vacation. And she got a call in the hotel room. And the call said, you need to come down to the gym where your husband is. She got down there and he passed away while doing his exercise. In his 40s. Okay. See, tragedy. So she came back home desperate to learn, desperate to do anything to take her from this space she was in, this massive loss. And so she shared with the students as they go forward, all these Berkeley students, what is it I can give you? What can I share with you at this service, this ceremony of your graduation that I can give you the gift to take with you? You've done the work. You're getting the hat, the collar, the degree, the certificate. But what can I give you? And she says, I'm going to give you the 3 P's. And the first one is personalization. And this idea is that, it's my fault. It's my fault. Have you ever done that to yourself? Yeah. Been in the middle of a tragedy and say, oh God, if I'd have just 10 minutes sooner, if I could have just been at the hospital this much, if I could have done this, if I could have done that. The truth is, not everything happens because of you. So, not taking failures personally allows us to recover so much faster. She says, this is the lesson that not everything happens to us. It happens because of us. And that's where we get stuck. You see, not everything happens because of you. Then the next one, she says, is pervasiveness. The belief that an event will affect all areas of your life. This is what happened to my dental hygienist. Everything became awful in her life. Everything. It didn't matter what it was, because she was projecting this awfulness out into the world. Everything is awful. You can't hide from awful. Everything is awful. In this belief, one setback will affect everything in your life and everyone in your life. The truth is, you're not bad at everything you do. You see? It doesn't matter what happened around you. You have the power to shift it. The third one is permanence. And this is the belief that it'll last forever. We feel that way when we first go through a tragedy. We really do. We feel like, oh my God, my life is now affected from now and forever. But what we know is the truth is it will dampen with time. We've all experienced that, right? Over time, things get better. We start getting to that upside of it. We start seeing the meaning in it. And wow, things start changing. So what tools can I give you today to take with you? What is it the next time a tragedy happens in your life? What positive, affirmative ways can we say, I'm going to bounce back? The first one is mindfulness. Right here, right now in this church, that's what you're doing. You came for a message today so that you could be mindful to the idea that tragedy is going to happen in my life, and I can not only grow through it instead of go through it, I can become a beacon of it and start sharing my light with others so that they can grow through tragedy. Positive reappraisal. Now, we talked about this before. That's where you basically take the idea that it's bad and you reappraise it and go, how can I make this serve me? How can I use this negative, this tragedy, in a way that supports others? Just like the lady did in the video from several sermons back, where they said, we're bringing our community together. We're getting things together. We're going to make this happen. Don't give up. That good old power of will, one of the 12 powers. Because it's easy to give up. It's easy, just like my dental hygienist gave up. It's easy, but we can't give up. We use that power of will. We support ourselves to go to the next level. Self-efficacy. And this refers to a belief that maybe someone might have told us that we can't get through it. You see, somebody might have said to us, oh, well, he can't never, Oh, well, he tries, but he doesn't. He just doesn't have the strength to pull up through it. We can't believe that. We have to know our true power that's within. Meaning, you see, the one thing my dental hygienist could have done when I look back at her is I think if she would have just used her children as that meaning, that purpose, right? If she could have said to herself, these people, these beautiful children, they don't deserve to suffer. And I am not going to allow what happened to them to affect and effect what's going on in their life. You see, when we have meaning or purpose, we can pull ourselves through things. We get that willpower. We get those things to happen in our lives. Strength in numbers, and I've said this before. If you're hurting, if you're going through a tragedy, reach out to someone. This is one of the best ways to work through any tragedy is numbers. Power of community, power of this church, power of the person next to you. So important. My grandmother, I called her Meemaw, so we're going to call her Meemaw. I'll never forget when she passed away. She had cerebral palsy. She was an amazing woman. Ended up, I told her she wasn't going to walk. She wasn't going to be able to have children or anything, and she proved them all wrong. She ended up becoming Handicapped Woman of the Year in the state of Kentucky in 1972 and in the city of Louisville. She made powerful ways, and I was her only grandson. So when she passed, it was probably one of the hardest things ever in my life. I was truly the apple of her eye. I knew it, and I felt so blessed because of it. But she had a way of doing things that I've never seen before. She wanted to plan her funeral 10 years out. So she goes and buys a book. And it has this book's about 40 pages. And I mean, it had everything. What earrings she was going to wear, her dress was going to be peach, it was going to be this. She had every single thing. And at first I thought it was weird. I said, why do you want to talk about this now? You're still young and healthy. We're just getting started. She said, because I don't want you to have to deal with that when it comes time. I want it to be done for you. I don't want anybody to question you about what I asked for, what I'm wearing, what I look like, how things are happening, what color flowers. I don't want you to do that. And I can remember somebody coming up to me after her funeral. And they said, why are you not crying? Why are you not sad? And I said, oh, I'm sad. But you see, I've built up resilience. My grandmother instilled that in me. She helped me do all this. I've been dealing with this for 10 years. I've been dealing with it for 10 years. And if I tell you it was exactly like the book, it was exactly like the book. I was so proud when I saw her laying there that I knew she was looking down over it in some way, shape, or form, saying, everything was exactly like I wanted it, and you got a smile on your face. It was beautiful. You see, tragedy doesn't have to be tragic. We have a choice. You can go out of this church today, right here and right now, and whenever something comes up in your life, as little as somebody pulling in front of you, you want to, and you stop and you say, wait, I'm going to become mindful of the situation. I'm going to put myself in a place of knowing that I've done my work. I don't need to be triggered by this. That doesn't mean we don't deal with things. I want to put that out there. We're not looking at this as a happy world and everything's beautiful and perfect. It's not. But what we know is if we do the work, if we become resilient, if we have the willpower, if we do all these things, which is why you're in this church today, every week, supporting it, learning the message of unity, then we can get through things. You see, we don't know our last day. So I invite you to go forth out of this church today. Have gratitude, appreciation, build resilience. Be there for your family. Be there for your friends. We don't know when our next tragedy is going to happen. But when it does, you've got some tools now. You've got some ways to move forward in that. I leave you with a beautiful passage that it really resonated with me as I close this. It's John chapter 14, verse 27. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not let them be afraid. You see, next time tragedy hits in your life, go forth from a place of power, resilience. You don't have to let the fear overcome you. God is. God is. God is.